some solutions. You know, over the course of the last week, we've seen Governor Lamont take a sort of rapid, haphazard approach in an attempt to keep the Connecticut Sun in the state of Connecticut. We are concerned that there is a lack of transparency, a lack of detail of proposals. Typically, when the state of Connecticut has looked at retaining companies for the purposes of job growth or economics, we've had a lot more detail, whether it was Jackson Labs, whether it was Sikorsky or Pratt & Whitney. There's been conversation. Today, we've had no conversation. We've only read about these proposals through press conferences, through brief media gaggles, and now through reporting. We are starting to see what the framework is for the state of Connecticut. And what we do know is that the state is looking to leverage a treasured asset in the state of Connecticut, that being Connecticut's pension fund. We think it is an unprecedented move. We think it deserves answers to our questions. And so we are calling on the governor to be transparent with what this proposal looks like, what has actually been submitted to the WNBA. And with that, I will turn it over for more remarks to Senator Harding.
Thanks, Vin. Good morning, everybody. Echoing in Vin's comments here, there's been a significant lack of transparency surrounding this alleged deal, which would involve these pension funds. Ultimately, you would think common sense would dictate that investing funds should simply be based upon what's a good investment. We haven't received any numbers or indications of what type of investment this would be. And unfortunately, it's a long line of how this administration conducts itself on money that isn't theirs. Whether it's taxpayer money, where the governor calls it small ball when you have a chancellor taking $30,000 plus on a purchase card to lavish meals, etc., or when it comes down to just flippantly making comments that pension funds, where hard-earned state employees are putting their money in, their retirement is being invested in, to be invested in a WNBA team with little to no details of what that investment is going to look like. There needs to be structure and fiscal responsibility and a level of respect for taxpayer money and for public employees' money. And it seems like the way that this administration handles both is alarming, to say the very least. And this is a glaring example, once again, just flippantly making comments that you're going to use potentially millions of dollars of hard-earned money to invest in something that we have little to no provisions surrounding. So we're here today to call on both the treasurer and this administration to bring some common sense and transparency to our hard-earned money, whether it be through the state employees' pension or whether it be through the taxpayers. And that's what we're here for today. I'm going to introduce the ranking member from the House on the Finance Committee, Joe Paletta, Representative Paletta.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader, and good morning, everyone. You know, when a constituent calls one of us up here, when a constituent calls one of us up here, the first thing they're going to ask is whether or not we're working to work towards affordability in Connecticut. That includes electric bills, that includes the cost of living, that includes property taxes here in Connecticut. Unfortunately, the thing that we hear the least is whether or not we're going to work to save the Connecticut Sun. I think that there is a ton of good, worthy proposals around that discussion, but today we are here to tell you that we should be better stewards of pension funds. More importantly, and as was mentioned before, ask yourself, you know, we should be laser focused on the cost of living in Connecticut. Should we be looking at helping folks around Connecticut combat the high cost of electricity or saving the sun? Should we be looking at helping folks that are paying some of the highest property taxes in the nation or saving the Connecticut Sun? Those are the things that from the Finance Committee I think we should be really focused on. And unfortunately, these proposals, while they've been kind of done in the dark, don't get us there. So with that, in my brief remarks, I would like to introduce my co-ranking member on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, Senator Ryan Fazio, who had a proposal during the regular legislative session to address this. And unfortunately, it fell along party lines and failed in committee. And I just want to highlight that. We voted on a proposal that would have addressed this with the state treasurer. And for some reason, the majority party decided not to take it up, and we find ourselves here today in this exact same predicament. So I'll let him tell you a little bit more. My partner on the Finance Committee, the ranking member, Senator Ryan Fazio.
Thank you, Representative. One of the most important issues for taxpayers, state employees, and retirees that gets talked about the least in Connecticut is the returns on $60 billion of pension assets and monies in Connecticut. Over the last 10 or 20 years, Connecticut has had one of the worst records of returns in the entire country, and that has cost taxpayers billions of dollars in higher taxes over that period of time. We have to be very, very careful about how we oversee and invest the tens of billions of dollars in hard-earned retirements and taxpayer dollars for state employees and Connecticut citizens. And that requires that we make necessary reforms in order to broaden responsibility and ensure adequate transparency and accountability in our pension management system. That would make this entire discussion about the Connecticut Sun deal today a lot more, one with a lot more confidence for us as people who are looking to protect the taxpayer and protect Connecticut citizens and state employees. In the past several legislative sessions, I and other Republicans have introduced a bill to transform how pension oversight is done in Connecticut, to institute a board of directors who would oversee and have fiduciary responsibility broadly as professionals with financial experience for the state employee pension investments. Connecticut is now the only state in the entire country where the elected state treasurer is the sole fiduciary, meaning the sole person with legal responsibility for oversight of investing tens of billions of dollars of state employee retirements that are backed by taxpayers. In the last year, North Carolina, just a year ago, North Carolina was one of two states with Connecticut who had sole fiduciary powers for their state treasurer. Their state treasurer, their new state treasurer, ran for his first term in office on the promise that he would reform that system and broaden responsibility, give away some of his own powers for the benefit of taxpayers and state employees, and he was ultimately able to pass that reform in his first year in office. We are not calling for anything different than what any other state in the country and its taxpayers and its state's employees have. Connecticut is one of just 50 states that now has a sole fiduciary in its elected state treasurer responsible himself or herself for the management of tens of billions of dollars of funds without legal oversight that is adequate for the protection of those people, for our state, its taxpayers, and its state employees. And regardless of what happens with the Sun investment, if we had this system with broad responsibility, with a board of directors who were professionals and who had legal responsibility and input for these decisions, then we could feel more secure in what decision ultimately is made. Our simple ask is that it be made with the taxpayer and with the state employees' retirement monies in mind, rather than policy questions or political questions. On the face of it, this looks like a political and policy issue that was raised by elected officials, including the lieutenant governor and governor, and ultimately has transformed into an issue of, should we be using state employee retirement funds on it? The state employee retirement funds, for the benefit of both state employees and taxpayers, should be invested on the basis of protecting their retirements and protecting the taxpayers, not political questions, not policy questions. And so our reform, which we've been proposing for the past 3 years, which Democrats in the Finance Committee, without really any adequate explanation, voted down on party lines, even though many Democrats privately will tell you that this makes a lot of sense. Our proposal would protect taxpayers, would protect state employees, would broaden out responsibility and power for the management of tens of billions of dollars rather than investing it in a single individual. In the long run, it would be to the benefit of the current and future state treasurers as well. I wouldn't want to be the sole person legally responsible for tens of billions of dollars. No person should, and no private or public organization operates in this way. This is good government. This would protect taxpayers. This would protect state employees. And in any case that there was a Connecticut Sun deal, it would give the public confidence that it was done for the right reasons. Thank you. And I believe that we're open to taking questions as well.
Are you saying that in other states that the treasurer does not have sole fiduciary power? In this case, doesn't the legislature still have to weigh in if the treasurer, or he can make the decision on his or her own?
If it was a state investment, my understanding is could be done by the treasurer's office, and it wouldn't have legislative or gubernatorial input, which is, raises the question: is this a economic development and policy decision, or is it a state investment decision? And if it's a state investment, if it's a public policy decision, it needs to be done with the legislature and with a vote and public input. If it's solely an investment decision, then it should be done through the treasurer's office, but it shouldn't be because of political input. And that's where the treasurer, by our proposal, would be protected if he had the input of a board that had fiduciary responsibility rather than being the sole fiduciary too.
Would you feel any differently if the amount of money were different? Maybe it was a few $1 million versus $100 million, or that's not what's the issue?
No, it's not. It's not the issue, because theoretically it also opens up the door. It's a precedent. If it's not done for financial reasons, if it's done for political reasons, it opens the door in the future to many more of these deals being done. It's an issue of principle, but ultimately, in the long run, it could accrue to the benefit or detriment of billions of dollars, as we've seen in the past. There are cases where the state treasurer, where Napier specifically, overrode the recommendations of the Investment Advisory Council, which is the advisory council which advises but is not a fiduciary to the treasurer. She has overridden them in the past. And, I think this current treasurer is a better treasurer than her, for instance. But we're not just making policy decisions for the current treasurer. We're making policy decisions for the next 10 treasurers and for the retirements of tens of thousands of Connecticut state employees.
And in the long run, the team could be sold anyway and moved to Boston anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all this effort could be made, and eventually Connecticut loses the team.
Yeah.
So if they came to you and said, here are the numbers, we've looked at it from every angle, maybe this is a little bit more of a volatile investment than we usually do, but here's why it makes sense and why it's a good investment for the state, then would you be supportive of putting money into the basketball?
That would certainly require them to come to us with any sort of detail.
Well, I guess the
think
question is,
philosophically, do you have an issue with using the pension fund to buy a sports team?
Right.
Obviously, you want more information, but should the state be using the pension fund? Should they be using a different fund? Should they not be doing this at all?
It's unprecedented, and I think getting back to Senator Fazia's original point, you have to ask the first question: is this for return on investment or is this for economic development? If it's for economic development, the pension fund is not appropriate. If it's return on investment, we could have a conversation. But fundamentally, the concern that we do have is that we don't have a broader investment board that would take that decision out of politics and make the decision based on return on investment. And that's why, to put a little bit of a point on here, if we are going to special session at the end of October, we would like this bill to be resurrected and part of the conversation, because we are very concerned that Connecticut is treading into uncharted waters by beginning to make direct investments into corporations through a pension fund, which is largely unprecedented in this entire country. It has not been done. And so that has raised the alarm to say, we need to move forward, we need to stop this. And I would hope that Democrats alike would have these same very concerns of how this is being done.
Well, the governor was asked yesterday, and he himself didn't have a lot of details. Things are still being worked out. So, with that...
And that raises even more concerns. This is slapped together in the middle of the night with no details. It's a complete disrespect to our state employees, to the taxpayers of Connecticut, and to our pension fund.
so when it comes to you, oh sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to add, first off, to Senator Fazio and Representative Candelaro's point, the governor's talking out of two sides of his mouth here, because in one sense, he initially comes out and says, well, we have to find a way to keep the team here. And then all of a sudden, when he determines that the pension fund is the vehicle by which he's going to do that, now all of a sudden it's because it's a great investment. So which is it, Governor? Is it a great investment, or are you using this essentially for corporate welfare? There might be an economic development reason for it, but at least come out and be honest about it. There's no level of transparency here. And to your point about getting answers, Senator Summers and myself both wrote a letter to the governor's office over a week ago saying, give us some information on this. We've yet to receive a response. Not even we've received this, we're looking into it, nothing. And it's a disservice to the taxpayers of the state and to the public employees of the state. This is how we handle their funds in such a flippant manner.
You're not saying shut the door, we shouldn't use pension funds under any circumstance, but you feel that changes need to be made with the treasurer, and you want more details to see if in fact this is an investment?
We believe in common sense, which means that if it's a good investment, then the pension funds can be used on a prudent investment. What Senator Fazio is saying, what we're all saying, is that's why we believe his proposal, Senator Fazio's proposal, should move forward in special session, in that you'll have a board of directors that will make a decision in conjunction with the state and make that decision for us, not just one particular person potentially being politically influenced to make a decision, which is not a good investment.
Right, jumping back a little bit, when it comes to using public money for the Sun in any form, to what extent do you guys see this as purely a dollars and cents thing, and to what extent is there some sort of non-monetary value to having a high-level professional sports team?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about non-monetary value, I mean, it's sort of, there's an economic component to that. And so we've seen that all the time. I pointed to Jackson Labs, to Pratt & Whitney, to Sikorsky. DECD, our Department of Economic Development, have invested in those type of things, and we have supported some of them. That's where the conversation should lie. It's a little bit disconcerting to me that this originated from, I think, the lieutenant governor, and then the governor jumping on board with this proposal. It didn't originate out of the treasurer's office, where if you're talking about a pension investment, a return on investment, it should be originating from him. So the fact that it's originating from other constitutional offices seems to suggest that this isn't about investing in your pension fund to get a return. This is about keeping a team in the state of Connecticut. If the governor wants to have that conversation, like we've had all the other times, we'll have that conversation. But the governor has not brought us into the room like governors have done in the past with several other deals. We are waiting on the outside trying to figure out what this animal looks like.
Right, when you talk about politics, obviously most of us in this room kind of know what you're saying, but spell it out for the cameras. What incentive does Ned Lamont have politically to get this deal done?
To get the deal done, or to make a policy reform that? Listen, I don't know. You should ask him, but the fact is that the governor and other elected officials have a long-term obligation to protect taxpayers and state employees and the state economy. And that means the best policies possible in order to protect them. This proposal is one we've made for several years when it came to light that Connecticut has lost billions of dollars for taxpayers and state employees over a long period of time by being just one of 2 states in the entire country to have sole responsibility for managing billions of dollars vested in an elected official, the state treasurer. We are making a proposal that will benefit everybody in the state for the long run, irrespective of short-term politics. Policy decisions should be based on what is in the long-term benefit of everyday citizens in the state of Connecticut, not what headlines will be in the next day or week or month.
Senator Harding, when you sent your letter to the governor, can you elaborate on the information you're seeking? And do you have any indication that the state has even been able to get financial information from the WNBA?
That's part of our letter, and that's part of our questions, is that what involvement does WNBA have in all this? My understanding, which we have received little to no information other than drips and drabs from the press, is that the WNBA basically has veto majority, or has a veto on this. So what is the likelihood that we may potentially put pension funds at risk or be involved in this, and the WNBA might turn around and say, we're not going to allow this? So there's a lot of questions. You have Attorney General Tong, once this came out, basically writing letters to the WNBA, basically asking them about their regulations. I mean, this is how off the wall this idea is, utilizing pension funds towards economic development. I think a key point here is this. You can't have it both ways. If this is for, and you should ask the governor, and we're all here asking the governor, is this for economic development? Because if it is, then you can't use pension funds for it. Pension funds are used to invest in prudent ways to grow the pension fund. That's what the treasurer is supposed to be there for. That's what this board of directors, if it was proposed and passed, would be there for. You can't have it both ways. So again, I urge all of you to join us in asking the governor, which is it, Governor? Economic development or prudent investment? Because you can't have it both ways. Because you're messing around with public employees' funds here and ultimately potentially costing the taxpayers in the long run. People that are moving out of the state in droves because they can't afford to live here any longer, and this is how we're playing games with their money? How is that fair?
So when was this proposal, I guess, if anyone recalls, first made? And also, this one may be a little bit of a homework assignment. You can get back to me after this, but do we have a bill number for the most recent proposal?
Yes, Senate Bill 1557 is the most recent proposal. And I think I've made it the proposal. Originally, it was probably with Senator Kelly and Representative Candelora for its state employees and taxpayers in the entire country. And it was one of only 2 states where the elected treasurer was the sole fiduciary of its pension system of tens of billions of dollars of investment returns. And not only that the only other state was the sole fiduciary, North Carolina, was the very bottom of pension returns. North Carolina is the one that just elected a new state treasurer on the promise of getting rid of the sole fiduciary system, and he was successful in his first year. Connecticut now stands alone with a very bad policy.
Would you be open to, from an economic development angle, and a state investment in the team? In other words, we talked to the governor about this yesterday, and his basic point was, well, do these guys have a plan to try and keep the team in the state?
Well, listen, I think just the context here is you do things through bonding or through the state budget. We have the 3rd highest taxes in the country, so we don't have any room in the budget. We are up against a bonding cap, especially if we're going to do something with hospitals. We tax people so much that we now have a public benefits tax in order to fund all the environmental and energy programs that people in the legislature have wanted over years. And so the only place for any sort of funding that's left appears to be the state employee pensions, which should be a mechanism for returning monies to state employees and protecting taxpayers, not for economic development. So, again, this is not to rule out any sort of deal if and only if it is done in the best interests of taxpayers and state employees. We are speaking to a broader problem of what is the best policy to devolve and spread out power and responsibility rather than concentrate it all in a single elected official and ensure that taxpayers and state employees are protected to the tune of billions of dollars for the long run.
Have you been able to sort of decode what the governor has said about the state being senior in this to a private investor? And as a financial professional, what do you make of what you've heard about the capital structure of this proposal?
I assume, if you're higher in the capital structure, you obviously have more protection theoretically in a liquidation or a bankruptcy. You have priority. So, doing things senior is seen as a more safe investment. I've seen, senior investments go well, and I've seen senior investments go poorly. So, I understand what he's saying, but we don't have any details beyond that. Imagine someone making a decision on a $100 or $300 million investment on the basis, we're going to be senior. It's like, okay, we're going to need some more details.
Going off of what Mike was asking before, I mean, is it important to you guys, or does it matter to you to keep the team in the state, or are you sort of content to just let that play out how it's going to play out?
I think we've got to look at the numbers. Obviously, having a sporting team in the state of Connecticut is important. We don't have a great track record. So to remind people, we had the Connecticut Tennis Center in 1991. We spent $18 million on that facility, which is now owned by Yale. We built the Norwich Stadium in 1995 for almost $10 million through a $6 million grant from DECD, which is now owned by the city of Norwich. I think they're now playing amateur baseball there, which isn't really giving us much of a return, obviously. We spent $3.5 million to renovate Yale Field, which is where the New Haven Ravens was located. They left in, I think, 2003. They were dissolved. Obviously, with my background in my personal life, sports is important. in the state of Connecticut. And that's not what we're saying here today, that it's not important. But what we are saying is we have to be smart about it. And again, to your point, if it's about economic development, then let's have that conversation. Let's look at the numbers. You know, I recall when we had Jackson Labs here, we had Pratt & Whitney here, we've done all sorts of tax credits. They had to show us the jobs that they were creating. We set metrics. We had clawback provisions if they don't develop what they promised to develop. It's a different analysis. And so to me, it seems as if the Democrats are trying to collapse an economic development program into our pension fund. And we are saying we need to take a step back and reform the way we do investments, because it's scary to me that our treasurer could go right along with this deal without having a prudent dialogue and looking at the return on investment. But if it's an economic development conversation, we'll look at the numbers, we'll have that conversation, but we don't have any information.
Do you think it's also a gamble in the sense that, and I don't know the details of what they're talking about, but, you know, a return on investment is based on how many people go to the games, what percentage the state gets. Well, you know, suppose it becomes like the Civic Center or, you know, the Excel, where, you know, they don't get the people coming there, and then what? Is that a concern also?
Yeah.
And those are things that you can't necessarily guarantee.
And the bigger, if we're a minority investor, you know, I have heard that, you know, the value in this team is to eventually move it out of the state. So is this going to be a short-term investment for the state of Connecticut, where the Sun is ultimately going to be moved to Houston or Boston? And what I don't want to see is, like I pointed out with these examples, the state of Connecticut, outside of this investment, goes and builds a $100 million practice facility with bonding funds that then becomes vacant. We have enough vacant stadiums around the state of Connecticut, and I think we would be concerned that we would be adding another one to the list. So part of that investment, there needs to be that conversation. Is the team committed to stay here? When Pratt & Whitney got their tax breaks, that was part of the agreement. They were staying in the state of Connecticut. They were not going to move elsewhere.
Representative Carney, to Alex's question about its importance of the Sun, you're sort of from that region. Do you want to comment on all the, no?
But I think the key is
Looking at this, it'd be interesting to hear from someone who's from the area, how you have personally.
Well, I think that it's kind of irrelevant. We do know there's about 4,000 people that attend the Sun games. They're coming from all over. They could be coming from Rhode Island, Massachusetts. They could be coming out of my district. That's not the relevant part of the conversation here. We are more concerned with the way the pension funds are being invested.
right, and I think that's the point. I think all of you are making our point, which is if it sounds like this is a question of economic development. If it's a question of economic development, then it shouldn't be the vehicle for funding it should not be the pension funds. That is purely an investment vehicle, not a utilization to utilize it in a manner in which we're utilizing it for economic development. So the questions you're asking are all fair, and I think we all, as legislators, have been asking those questions, but ultimately it shouldn't be coming out of public employees' funds to as the vehicle to fund it. It should be coming out of either the bonding or other operational funds.
Do either of you have a preference on the, we've heard some Eastern Connecticut lawmakers talk about the location of a potential practice facility? Ryan or Joe would vote on the bonding for that. Do you guys have any thoughts on where it should be located, Hartford or closer to Office?
I just do want to, I guess I'll reiterate exactly what Senator Harding and Representative Candelora said, is we would love for the team to stay. We would love for more teams to come to Connecticut. But the question is a policy decision, you know, and as Senator Harding said, you're kind of making our points for us because we don't know any of the details here. And it's a $100 million decision that we don't know the details on. But what we know is that is not satisfactory. First of all, there needs to be transparency. And the long-term question of how we manage tens of billions of dollars is one where we do know the answer, and 49 other states know the answer. The only people who don't know the answer is the leadership of this state government, and that is not adequate for state employees or for taxpayers.
Gentleman over here asked a question about committee. I didn't get your name. What's your name? Brandon. Okay. You asked about the process during committee. I mean, I don't think you had a crystal ball, But during the committee, we anticipated something like this coming up. Okay, we anticipated that there was going to be a situation in the near future where the treasurer might have the sole responsibility to make a very important decision with taxpayer money, with pension funds. That's why we proposed a bill. You know, for those of you that know how the building works, which I think everyone here knows how the building works, we proposed a bill in committee. Guess what? It was defeated along party lines 5 months ago. We could have been in a different position right now, not talking about the Connecticut Sun. We're talking about having one person who is a great guy, but future people that are going to have that position. One person being charged of billions of dollars. That's a lot of money. Hard-earned taxpayer dollars, pension funds. One person. We're the only state. We have to make that policy change. We should take up Senator Fazio's bill in special session. The governor should admit that this is an important bill that's worthy of the attention of the entire legislature, and start putting some transparency and accountability in that office. Because this is not the only time this is going to happen. This is going to happen again, where one person is in charge of a major investment.
Right, no other questions? Thank you
On
all.
topic,
Yeah.
another state investment, Yukon Health is looking to possibly buy some hospitals. Is that good for Yukon Health and those hospitals, or do you have concerns about that too?
So I think that the devil is in the details, and it's still being worked out. I mean, certainly the federal bill that was just passed provides more money for rural hospitals. So the viability of Day Kimball, we're still looking at, and it may breathe some life into them. Certainly, we know Waterbury is a problem, Waterbury Hospital, that we need to do something. And I think the legislature generally is willing to take a look at this to see how we could make Bristol, Waterbury, and Day Kimball sustainable in the long run. You know, to date, up for a number of years, going back to 2016, the state of Connecticut has been subsidizing our small hospitals significant amounts of money. In the last 5 years or 6 years alone, it's been $25 million a year that's been allocated. So we do need to have that conversation and right the ship, and we're looking forward to those details as well. One of the things that we understand is that the vote, however, will not come back to the legislature. So UConn is able to make the decision without our input.
I also think you asked a good question, because it kind of shows you this administration's attitude towards we're going to buy hospitals now, we're buying basketball teams. I mean, this is all taxpayer money, or in this case, public employees' money. There needs to be further transparency surrounding the details of all of this. And it doesn't seem like day to day, what you hear in dribs and drabs, that there's any level of fiscal responsibility or transparency on not private funds, not personal funds. These are funds of all of you back home. That's the problem, and it's an inherent nature in this administration. And frankly, I would just argue the Democratic majority in this building, and that's why we're all standing here. So thank you so much.
Can I ask a question? I'd like to know, I would like to know, with the new leadership at the FCC now, and some of the changes that they're making, and to decide what is in the best interest of the public, and what we're seeing with broadcasters, are you concerned about freedom of speech?
No, of course, not at all. I mean, we're standing here today at a podium expressing our opinions. I'm not concerned about free speech at all. I do think, to the point, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about the termination of Jimmy Kimball based on remarks of what he had said the other night. My understanding is that Disney chose to eliminate that program because he stated falsehoods during his comedy show and refused to retract those falsehoods. So companies obviously are exposed to libel lawsuits or defamation, and they need to do what they need to do as a business to protect themselves when people want to be a little bit reckless with their free speech. But generally speaking, I think we're founded on a country. I'm more concerned, frankly, with the radicalization that we are seeing with our youth. That is what is leading to people being concerned about exercising their free speech. It was very disconcerting to see an individual be gunned down because of his free speech. I think it has had certainly a chilling effect and given all of us pause in this building, Democrat and Republican, of where we are as a society. But I think that certainly needs to be where our focus is how we disengage people from this violent behavior and bring them back into to society to have more meaningful conversations.
I also think we should be concerned about the fact that a late night comedian thought it would be a joke to talk about a 30-year-old father losing his life.
Well, to be clear, he still has his free speech. He can talk anytime he wants. He just can't do it for ABC.
One more off-topic question real quick. What is your reaction to the formation of the Northeast Public Health Collaborative?
I don't know any details on that one. We'll have to get back to you. Thanks.